You're listening to Pathways and Means, a podcast that inspires and shows people how to tap into their creative spirit. We sit down with leaders and makers in every industry to talk about their process, what inspires them, and about how to build incredible things with the power of creativity. The future belongs to the creators, so come join us. This is Pathways and Means. So Ryan, today I'd love to have a conversation around the box of creativity.
Sure.
So there's this concept that I think everyone uses as their metaphor for creativity, which is thinking outside the box. But then there's this funny thing that happens inside different creative spaces where people box in who they think is creative, and all of a sudden a lot of people find themselves in a place where they can't identify as a creative individual because they feel like they don't fit inside of that box, right? If you're not an artist, if you're not, someone that's like in an innovation department inside of a business, you can feel as if maybe you're left out of the human creative process and experience. And today, I think, maybe we start talking about some of our experiences, as well as maybe some of what the science says, so that we can potentially think outside the box when it comes to creativity.
That's so fun. See, there's an instance of creativity in motion. Solid. Welcome to the program, everybody.
Ka-ching.
So, this is a situation that you run into sometimes where, especially when you're striking up a conversation with people about creativity, where there's this sense where like, oh, I'm not a painter, so why is that useful to me? But what we find is that whether it's in business or whether it's content creation, entertainment, anything like that, everybody inherently knows, there's that term formulaic, and it exists for a reason, because people can spot the patterns in these things that they see over and over again. And it's like that extends beyond media. So, your job may be formulaic or aspects of it are formulaic. And what that really is saying is that it's kind of boring. And the antidote to that boredom situation can come in the form of creativity. And there's no area of life where that's not the case. So, looking into how creativity can be applied elsewhere outside of the creative arts, I think that the sticking point is that word creativity has been used in such a way that people think of only the creative arts, or they think only of visual arts. So thinking of creativity in terms of just being something new and different will immediately unlock your mind to, well, there are new and different things everywhere. I can make new and different things wherever I see a space where such a thing could exist. And so I think that it would behoove people for sure to get out of that mindset that creativity is inappropriate for certain situations. I don't think a situation exists that couldn't be improved by a creative approach.
So you are someone who, in your experience, especially when he was younger, was involved a little bit more in what people would call the arts, right? And then as you went along in your professional career, maybe migrated to some of the places that a lot of the punk artists will affectionately refer to as the suits. So, right, but I think just through other conversations that we've had, you talking about how there's not a situation where creativity, looking at things from new and different angles, might not be useful, right? They've been useful in all of these different stages. So maybe if you're willing to share a little bit about what those different environments look like and what some of the common threads were between them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far back as I can remember, I come from sort of what people might call a colorful family, a lot of big personalities and that kind of thing. And yes, exactly. And so, we were big into the performing arts from elementary school. My sister and I were in plays on stage all the time. And, we learned to really quickly love the applause and that sort of thing. And so I stuck with that. And in high school, I was in choir and I was in more musicals and stuff like that. I was also getting heavily into video production at the time, sort of outside of my academic focus. It was just something that I found a lot of fun in. And it's funny because it's like you had said, I then, head off to college. I'm not interested in professionally pursuing the arts in any kind of way. It's a lot of fun, but I'm interested in, money kind of thing. And you got to be really, really good. So I, had it figured at the time. I was just like, that's just not what you do. So when I went off to college, I leaned more heavily into the video production side, television production side, that kind of thing. But I ended up with a degree in political science and strategic communications. So I was like, what do you do with that? Go get a job working for people in government. So that's what I did. And so for 3 years, I worked for the state. And what's funny is the reason why that job that position was as successful as it was, in hindsight, was because I was employing my things that I had learned through my creative exploits. I was in charge of video for the secretary at the time, and it was a situation where, especially as the pandemic happened, many things turned into video. Many things that were in person became video. And so we looked around, and the secretary observed, well, you go to this department in Georgia, you go to this department in California, all these videos look the same. They're very locked down, simple stuff. And he wanted something fun. And so I sort of had, within reason, a lot of free reign to flex my creative muscles, and the results were great. We had people who were in this state agency for 3+ decades who were talking about how just this little spice of maybe a little bit of humor, maybe a little bit of creative editing, just once in a while adding a little something in there, was able to make people's day and really make their whole week. I mean, I was getting emails from people across the state who I've never met before, and I realized that wasn't the result of me fitting into this box of state government. It was actually a result of me, through creativity and essentially through my art, expanding the boundaries outside of that box. And people found that as a really welcome addition to the position. And so, yeah, I was with the suits. I'm out here with the young revolutionaries again. But I found that the thread that brought me from the joy that I got in the creative arts all the way through the joy that I got working with the state and with the joy that I still have day to day, the root of it is creativity. And I think that is the case for all of us. It's the case for everybody, no matter what you're doing and no matter what you're making. The joy of it comes from that new and different and exciting creation. And, it's like we had covered before, that expression is appropriate in all walks of life and in all situations, as far as I can tell.
No, man, that's fantastic. So I know that there are a lot of common lines, but really maybe being on stage for a theater production may carry with it a very different valence than, say, being behind the camera at a state agency. So maybe speak a little bit into how they felt different, and if you had a preference one way or another. I think sometimes it's, maybe people don't always have the opportunity to sit on both sides of the spectrum. And I just think those perspectives are valuable.
Sure. Yeah, sure thing. So I was a person who was involved in stage productions for probably 14 years. And I got stage fright every single time. Every single moment that I was on stage, I was scared and I was nervous. But I was having enough fun that it was sort of okay. But I loved the storytelling aspect of it. When you're on stage and you're out there doing a performance or some kind of artwork, and you can connect with people in the audience and you see the looks on their faces as their eyes light up because they're totally engrossed in the situation, there's just nothing better. And so I thought to myself, what's a way that I could, get an applicable skill that still maintains that sense of wonder for people who watch it? And for me, that was video. And, I grew up watching Jurassic Park since I was 3 years old, and I've always been a real fan of the art of filmmaking. And I thought, well, this is an area where we can extend and sort of flex that same muscle of creative storytelling, but with very, very, very wide application. And so it is a very different process. Sort of the creation of longer form videos or anything artistic in the video area is a labor of love. It takes much longer and much more forethought, and reshoots are tough and that kind of thing. But there's nothing quite like the satisfaction of seeing the finished end product. Actually, the only thing better than that is when other people see the finished end product. And, it's as simple as people are scrolling through their feed and they see a new video and they leave a like on it. And, it kind of makes my heart soar, because I'm like, you stopped and watched this thing that I've been putting together. It's like this thing I put together for you, really. Even if I don't know you, I put it together for you, And putting it together for you was the gift for me. And that's the part of video production that's always been something that artistically, very uniquely has spoken to me in that way, even outside of music or anything like that. Although, now that we think about it in terms of like artistic expression, thinking of you're this person now who's into the business side of things, into the professional side of things, but you've been active as a musician for quite a long time. When did you get started with that?
Oh my goodness. I fell in love with music at a very, very early age. Both my mom and my dad were just engrossed in it, had their own musical experiences too. And I mean, my dad was the sort that like took his Walkman when my mom was pregnant and like put it on her stomach so that I'd be able to just jam out to music, right? And at 10, I tried out for cello. 11 on trumpet, 12, my grandfather gave me my first guitar, and it was like something finally clicked and stuck because it was something that I was able to practice and continue with, and was like out of this thing. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even good, but it was just, I had like this little box that I could sit on my lap and I could just pump out feeling. Right? And in that moment, having a chance to engage with that, my mom and my dad had shown me just how music has this incredible capacity to speak into human experience, to make you feel all sorts of raw emotions. And it was like, as I started to round the corner on that, it became a little bit more clear as to how one could take control of it. And man, for years and years and years, it was just something that I leaned into. And then I think I hit a turning point because it was one of those that I was pretty shy on the performances. I did some talent shows, this and that. I was really getting technically good, but it was something that it was a little bit more of an internal experience, right? It was like my music was for me, and that was pretty much it. But I think that there's something that you said a little while ago about like the video hitting the feed, that there's something really magical and special when other people can participate in the process. And I think for me, it almost worked in reverse. I was like a guitarist and a musician first, and I remember going out to Lawrence, Kansas. I was dating this girl at the time, and she introduced me to a group that was out there. And we ended up going to the show at a local shop. It was literally like a thrift store, and they had moved around all of the different racks in the back. And there was this guy named Corbin and a few other of his bandmates, and they had some speakers that were up. I've actually spent a lot of time learning sound engineering and production on the side so that I'd be able to take a little bit more artistic control over the music that I do produce. And it just wasn't a skill that anyone in this group had. They were all just raw, fantastic musicians. But when you take your PA and you put it inside of a thrift store with a bunch of clothes and everything was just all mashed up, and it sounded as if like someone was playing a radio through a tin can. and so I was like, I'm gonna take the radio out and then we're gonna play with it. I remember walking up to him and I'm like, hey, I'm not gonna mess with your stuff. I've done this a time or two. I can take a picture of everything and get it back to where it was. But would you mind if I helped like EQ you? He was like, bro, sure. And in about 30 seconds, I had it singing. And all of a sudden there was this moment where this other set of musicians were able to just live in their element and play. And we were able to more thoroughly enjoy the show. And it became like this collective artistic experience that everybody was able to participate in. We each got to have our own pieces of our craft. And it was that whole new and different, right? They walked their stuff in. It was a new environment, which required different things to do it. So there was that creative space for me to operate in to where I could bring everybody up to a certain level, and everybody benefited from it, right? So I ended up connecting with that group pretty deeply, spent a lot of time in the Lawrence scene, eventually ended up being one of the sound guys out at the Granada there for a bit, and was able to just help artists as they were passing through really, put on their best deal, and made a lot of really good relationships around it. And it was one of these spaces that it was almost like the intersection between business and music, right? Because like most people, when they think of the artist and the musician, it's the person that's on the stage. And in a lot of ways it is, right? There would be shows where I would be running sound and then I would get up for my set and somebody would end up filling in for me. But, it's really this collective, collaborative experience where everybody together is working to make something beautiful, make something valuable, make something better. And it almost like gave me a little bit of that business side, because it was more in like the music business when you think about it. And it helped break a barrier for me because I could see my role in the lot of it. And so for me, when I ended up transitioning more into the business world later on, I got into some pretty like rough financial spots. And so I had a couple of guitars that I was very proud of, a whole bunch of gear. I ended up selling it so that I could pay rent. And I remember stumbling into the business community as I was looking for ways to sort of provide the value that I had felt at different times, whether it was through my songs, whether it was, you know, that feeling when Corbin's face lit up when he was like, "This is me and thank you." Business was a tool for me to find different ways to do that at scale and for more people. And what was funny is, even though all of my guitars were at the pawn shop and I wasn't able to sit down with this little box and make someone feel something, for me to feel something myself, you know, I changed one box to another. It was like, now I got a computer screen. Now I've got a box that I'm inside, but in that space, I've still got the capacity to use those skills and to push something out that's going to change somebody, that's going to put a smile on their face. And I think if you have one experience, you've got access to the other, so long as your identity doesn't tell you that it's one or the other, right?
See, that's interesting, and that's what I was thinking, because when you were talking about your experience in terms of like the arts and the teamwork and the problem solving that goes into it, this dichotomy of the two different camps of like the business type and the musician type, in much the same way, they operate essentially in the same patterns. So like, as a person now who's been in both sides of this, would you say that's fair?
I think it's absolutely fair. And you know, just again, I think the one thing that keeps people from being able to operate in both is just sort of this artificial exclusion between the two. If you say, I am the artist, I'm on stage, my lyric is the only thing that matters, then don't necessarily be surprised when you have trouble signing to the label that's all of a sudden going to want to build a business around your craft. Similarly, if you're just the suit, you're just the business person, and you think that the arts are, you know, for people that don't shower and blah, 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 it's like, no, that's not real. We have to make statements of value. There's got to be a purpose and a reason and, you know, oftentimes a beauty around what it is that we do. I think the thing is that both of those live in both people, and the only reason that you wouldn't find yourself operating in those ways is because you've got some hang up or preconception as to what creativity is. And man, we just, at Creative Pathways and Means, we interact with so many people. There are artists, there are entrepreneurs, there are community leaders that are all taking their creativity, and sometimes it came from a place where, you know, they were a musician first and then they were an entrepreneur, or, you know, maybe they were a nurse that just literally saw the same thing every single day and thought, what if? And she leaned into it, and that ended up changing how her hospital operated on systems. I think to say that one is not creativity would be confusing if you're looking at it from the right perspective. And I think that's part of, you know, just one of the messages that we're really pushing into is like, look, if both of those experiences lived in you and were consistent, you should be able to draw on those skills and those perspectives to help enhance your creativity wherever it is that you go. It's like, what a blessing to be able to move like that. What if you thought that it could only be one way? What if that one way doesn't work? What if you're just the artist and you never figure out how to get the business side of it, right? You know, we don't want for you to be starving forever. What if you're just the business person that only knows how to make more Disney product? Right? We don't want for that for you. We want your perspective, your angle of beauty and pain, and what the world could be for us knowing it. I don't think it's always an easy thing to consolidate. We definitely lean heavier into one or another, but I think that that's part of the process of breaking the box of what people think creativity is.
We can see to a degree the evidence of this within several examples of like celebrities. How many people are actors who are also musicians? And how many rappers then became really successful business moguls? You know, this is a situation where that type of, you know, I don't want to say antiquated, but that type of thinking where, you know, this is your lane and you're staying in it is becoming a thing of the past. You know, much in the same way that now everybody who gets big on social media becomes to some degree their own publicist. You know, there are elements within everything where you have to get at least a little bit good in all these different areas. And it seems to me that the people who rise the most in these spots are the ones who are already thriving somewhere creatively. And then we're able to take that same skill set and translate it into this different but strikingly similar situation.
I think that you stumbled onto something that's really funny, because when people look at those sorts of celebrities, right? When Dre made his first Billy, or when, you know, Steve Jobs ends up coming up with some wildly creative new product, or at least was helping lead that charge, we look at those people and we don't doubt for a second that both business and the arts and community can live consistently inside of a person. There's no knee-jerk reaction that's like, oh, because they made $1 billion, they're not creative, they're just savvy business people. We understand it. But when we look in the mirror, a lot of times we take the one that's the most comfortable with us, and we can't find a way to integrate those different parts. I would conjecture that the reason that some of those people have lived such powerful and creative lives is because they don't buy into that myth, right? They understand that arts, business, and community, the ABCs, if you will, of creativity, are things that live inside of everybody. And the more that you can grow in each one of those areas, the more that you're going to be able to thrive. Now, I'm sure each one of them probably had a tendency, right? Like Dre was probably heavier into his music, but understood that he needed to surround himself with people that were heavier into the business. And that was okay. They all had all of it. They just needed to help lean on one another where they weren't as strong. But again, man, I just can't imagine a world what it would have been like if some of those people would have been like, this is all I am, and this is all it'll ever be, and I can be creative in these ways, and that's it. You know, I think that it's better for them, it's better for us, and it's better for the world when we're able to open that up. And so it's probably worth just asking yourself some questions. You know, do I feel that these are the only arenas where I can genuinely put out my perspective, where I can try to make something new? I don't think it is, but it takes some practice, right?
You know, in terms of this topic, I think that this would be a really good time actually to address something, because I worry that we might inadvertently alienate some people who might get the wrong idea. Because we talked a little bit about how creatives who are great in one area can become creatives, you know, somewhat seamlessly, who are great in other areas. And I would hate for someone to be sitting, listening, thinking, well, I can't be creative, so then I can't be great at anything. What would you say to somebody who says that they just aren't creative by nature, they just can't do it?
You know, that's a tough question. It's a meaningful question. And I would say that if someone finds themselves in a place where they just can't see moving creatively, one, I want to say I feel you. And I think that all of us have felt that at one time or another. I also say, you know, my heart goes out to you, because a lot of times the reason that somebody would be thinking that way is because they've been put inside of an environment, right, where creativity doesn't feel like an option. The human being is born creatively. You can't find a kid alive that looks at a bunch of toys on a table and doesn't turn them into just this magical fantasy land of possibility and wonder. And the only reason that they wouldn't is if they're in some gray, drab, concrete box where there aren't any options for them to be able to play in. You know what? Some people are living in some pretty stark realities where, you know, for one reason or another, their environments, their situations, the people that they're around may end up cloistering some of that natural spark, and it can become something that eventually is biological, that lives inside of you, that can require treatment or certainly a change of pace or environment, you know. But over time, the environmental factors can tease up this lie that you think that the entire world is like that little box, right? And if you're able to break out of it, then you can see and you can start to lean into what creativity actually is. Your body knows, man. Your body knows. And it's such a beautiful thing, you know, the people that were able to experience that fully and didn't have any barriers and were able to just lean into it. For those that didn't have that opportunity, that might not have had it as easy, or, you know, maybe the difference sometimes is that people have the same struggles, and someone's able to take their art, it becomes so closed in that the only option is to break through, right? We know a lot of artists have had a tremendous amount of pain, and at some point the energy behind that pain ended up bursting open, and someone found themselves as a musician. Someone discovered that they cared so much about an idea that they became a great business owner because their passion for solving that problem became so big. I think it's the people in the middle that are experiencing maybe just enough pain and just enough environmental constraints that they can't necessarily lean into it. And I would just encourage you, in as much as it's possible for you to make the most of the environment that you're in, if you're not able to do so, to see what could be possible to change it, and then try your best to surround yourself with someone that maybe in one area or another is moving in ways where they feel safe enough and confident enough to try and do something new and try and do something different. Because no matter how long you've been out of the game, if you put yourself in a place where it's safe to do so and you surround yourself with people that are moving in that way, I guarantee you, like, it will happen. You will remember that primal spark that will get you back into that place. And I'm not here to say that it's easy, but I am here to say that it's your birthright, and I want it for you. So just give it a shot.
Interestingly enough, as far as talking about environmental factors, these situations where people can sort of, believe this lie that it's always been this way and this is how it has to be, and that situation can be draining for people. That can be a situation in which the answer, ironically enough, is the new creative approach. Because if we're talking about a situation like, let's say, for example, that you live in a town that you think is boring and you've just always wanted to get out of it and you can't seem to get out of it. Well, what is it about the town that makes it boring to you? The same old thought that does the same old thing. That's the planning that goes into the day. If it's your thought that this needs to be improved, then it can be improved by you, because you have the capacity to recognize it, and they need new ideas in order to change because they won't know to otherwise. So even, in exploring ways to become more creative, that in itself can become a creative exercise. So it's something to think about in terms of people who are having a hard time maybe finding their creative footing. Again, if you think you're not creative because you don't know how to draw, it's bigger than that. You can be creative in any kind of enterprise that you're in, and you should strive to be. But I think that people might not know that that's an option, or they might not know they have the capacity, but it is, and they do. And like you had said, it's a process. It's a learned skill. But it's a learned skill that will infinitely pay off way more in the end than it will take the effort to get there.
Right. I'll say this and then we'll probably wrap up, but I don't know how is a world apart from I am not creative. And I think sometimes people can mistake the two. At one point, I had no idea how to play guitar. At one point, I didn't know how to talk. I didn't know how to walk. I've been able to use those things in new and different ways to carry me far. And I think that any skill is like that at one point, right? You have to sit in the space of not knowing, but you have to find a source of inspiration. What's a positive belief in a potential future that is good enough that you're willing to sit with that not knowing, and you're willing to seek the answers as to how it is that you're going to get to that next place, right? And I think for those that may be in a space where they think that they're not creative, like maybe you haven't been hit with inspiration yet. Maybe there hasn't been something that has so lit a fire in you that it's worth going through that state of not knowing, that lack of confidence, and for you to seek answers so that eventually you're taking baby steps. You play your first chords, and then you play your first song, and then you play your first show, and then you play your first show for 100 people, and then 1,000, and then 10,000, and 100,000. If that's something that's in the cards for you and you want it, you have to sit there and marinate with the possibility. But not knowing right now is okay. Everybody goes through it. And, I just hope that people are able to lean into creativity in whatever aspect of life it is. If you're in a business, and you're wondering what might make this worthwhile, instead of like you're talking about in, sort of the smaller town mentality, which I don't have anything against small towns. They can end up being a little bit routine, just like, a day job in Upper Manhattan can end up being really pretty routine. Right. But the human being craves to some degree a sense of new and different. Where can you put yourselves in a situation where it's worth doing something that's new and different? And then if you don't know how, are you sufficiently inspired? Are you aiming high enough in order to get you to the point where you're willing to push into it? I hope that you are. I hope that you will. If not, think about it for a second and look for something that would be inspiring enough for you to take the first step. I think at that point, it doesn't matter if you're in arts, if you're in business, or if you're in community. Your creative spark is going to end up igniting, and I think you'll be blown away at how much, once you really get used to moving in those ways, it's going to serve you in every aspect of your life.
Absolutely. I can't think of a better way to wrap a bow on that one. I think that's an episode.
Ryan, thanks, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found today's episode informative and inspiring. If you liked what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to Pathways and Means wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to learn more about CPM and how to grow creatively into the future, visit creativepathwaysandmeans.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok, where we post daily content and connect and engage with creators like you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.